We're going to start off with the men. We're going to go with James. We're going to go with Snize and with Shipped. Kappa back in. I'm going to start with you, James. Just break me down this men's final. No rush. Just do as you want.
Okay, so yeah, it's kind of, in a way, second best final we could have hoped for in terms of what the bookies might have been expecting and what fans might be looking for. I think, in a way, for me personally, this is a better final than if we had got a Rafa Djokovic final, because I think Thiem has done a lot more against Djokovic recently than Rafa has, at least away from the clay. So this is the kind of matchup where I think history would tell us that Djokovic is likely, even if he struggles, to come through this. He's not really struggled at the Australian Open. He's won 47 of his last 50 matches and 24 of his last 25 against the top 20 at this event. So he hasn't really struggled against anyone. This week, I think he's just dropped the one set early on against Struff, and since then he's kind of been free rolling. He did look under pressure against Federer in that first set, 4-1 down, love 40 for double break. You'd have to argue he was at least a little bit lucky to come out of that without even dropping a set. But he's basically looked untouchable overall this week. Anytime he's been put under pressure, he's come up with the right kind of response. The match against Schwartzman was excellent baselining, and Schwartzman didn't even manage a set. It was just far too clinical. And I think a lot of it comes down to Djokovic's serve. He's improved his serve a lot. Maybe his baseline game is not quite as good as it used to be, but it's certainly close. And that extra bit of pop on serve, especially the second serve, that makes all the difference. I mean, we saw that against Federer. After Federer failed to win that first set, he didn't generate a single break point in the next two sets against Djokovic. I mean, that is just excellent. He's never usually been quite so clinical on his own serve. A lot of historical things are suggesting that Djokovic is likely to win this, and he might even do it quite comfortably. But I think the problem with that is that this is quite a unique and new situation against Thiem. Thiem's a player who has always had the measure of the elite, but generally in the past it's been on the clay. But he's shown recently that actually he's clearly improved his game on the hard courts. I think he's had some coaching switch-ups, and effectively he's implemented a couple of new tactics that have made all the difference. And we saw this at the ATP Finals, where he was able to beat Djokovic and Federer back-to-back. In fact, he's won 5 of the last 6 against the big 3, and 4 of those were on hard courts. So it would be unfair, in my opinion, to suggest that history is the only guide here. There's clearly, for Djokovic that is, because there's clearly a history for Thiem that says he tends to break those trends. He's been one of the most profitable players to back against the elite. And he's actually won 3 of the last 4 meetings and 4 of the last 6 against Djokovic, albeit all on clay. So, all bar 1 on clay. So there's a mixture of both. And I think the way Thiem's played this week, he was excellent against Rafa. He was excellent again against Zverev. Little bit of nerves at points, and I think more nerves are probably to be expected in this final from Thiem. But at the same time, these things can always go both ways. So Djokovic has the weight of history behind him, and one of the things he's always been able to do historically is play the big points well. But if he doesn't, to start off with, maybe Thiem plays them too well, maybe he just gets a little bit nervous. Who knows what happens if that doesn't continue? Usually overperformance will mean revert. I'm not convinced it will with Novak, but I'm not convinced it won't. And of course, add to that the fact this is Thiem's first hardcourt final and slam final, and it's effectively the first time that he's had a really, really good pop at Djokovic away from clay. And so I would say that might mean that he's nervous, that he questions himself a bit much, but it could also mean that he swings freely. And we've seen when Thiem swings freely, he is probably the most lethal player. The power he can develop on both wings is just ridiculous. I don't really think, maybe Wawrinka's comparable, but even then, Thiem probably has a higher peak now. So to me, he's exactly the kind of player that actually could beat Djokovic. I wouldn't expect it. I think the prices are probably about right on the money line. But at the same time, For me, I would not be wanting personally to go against Thiem right now. He's exactly the kind of guy who could break all these trends. I've personally gone for the over bet, and that was when we were being offered a line of 36.5. And effectively for me, I just think this line's too short. If you look at, I think it's 8 of the last 13 sets they've played against each other have actually gone over 12 games. And they met at the French Open last year, and I think the last 3 sets were all 7-5, and it was 5 sets. So this is the kind of situation where you end up with, well, actually, despite what the bookies are saying, history shows this has been very tight, and it's been pretty serve-orientated. So, yeah, for me, that was my play on this match. I would expect Djokovic to win, but I've got less faith in the stats and the history with this particular matchup than I might have had with someone else. And I'm also I'm really gunning for Thiem. Could really do with someone else winning one of these slams. Has to happen at some point.
Okay, I'll come to you. Well, we look at Thiem. He's actually swinging freely, and any tennis player who swings freely is going to be dangerous. Any player that sees off Nadal is going to be dangerous. Now, how does he go and beat Djokovic?
Well, it's not like he's never done it. He's gone up against him head-to-head in some huge high-leverage matches, most notably what James brought up, that semifinal at Roland Garros last year, and acquitted himself very well. Djokovic, you look at that match and you look at those statistics specifically, and you think that was a kind of a toss-up match that Thiem was able to win. But Djokovic really deployed some pretty strategic tactics to keep himself in that match. The weather was a little weird. He was really lengthening his points to try to get the rain delay to work in his favor at certain times. That was just a very strange match in general. And I thought Thiem, clearly on clay, I would favor Thiem as the better player. And on hard court, and specifically in a Grand Slam final, and specifically at this Australian Open, I think it is, correct and an appropriate line to have Djokovic as big of a favorite as he is. That compounds if you have a rainy day on Sunday and they have the roof closed and the conditions are a little faster. Thiem, absolutely, his form in this tournament and specifically in his upset over Rafa Nadal has benefited substantially from just sort of slower playing conditions. The ball is playing into his strength. The court speed being a little slower this season is playing into his strength. And if they happen to have an open roof, then I think we're talking, if it's a little humid but cooler, I think you're talking about Thiem being very live in this match. How does he go about doing it is an interesting question, just in terms of how this game, the match state plays out. Thiem has been extremely aggressive early in matches against the big three. He doesn't let the match come to him. He doesn't take his chances with, early set tie breaks, early set, coin flips. He likes to be very aggressive in these spots. I think we'll see a very different player come out of the gate in this one than what we saw versus Alexander Zverev, where he basically, it looked to me at least like, number one, the conditions weren't playing in his favor. It was a heck of a lot faster. And number two, he looked to me to be saving some of his juice. He was like, okay, let's see if I can get these wins in tie breaks without, exposing all of my best stuff, without pushing myself to the red line. And I think that may serve to have, give him his best chance to pull off this upset against Djokovic. My personal handicap on this one, I think Djokovic wins. I think it's a 3-1 match. But I think Thiem takes the first set here, and I think he can do it in style because, James brought up the point that Djokovic's serve has been reformed to a bit, and it's still not a serve I'm at all scared of, especially if I'm a solid returner like Dominic Thiem is. It's more that, Djokovic's second serve used to be an enormous liability, and now it's just not that much of a liability. But I think that you can, Djokovic is more likely to try to let this match come to him. He hasn't really sustained hardly any fatigue or damage in his run to this point in the tournament. So presumably the longer this match goes, the more it tips in his favor. And I think we see Dominic Thiem get a pretty comfortable first set victory. And then Djokovic slowly closes the gap and then pulls away in sets 3 and 4 here. I am in agreement with James. The over games is a solid look. I personally also very much like the Dominic Thiem handicap at plus 5.5 games. And again, this is largely under the auspice that we could see a first set 6-2 Thiem. And then that really puts you in very, very solid footing with a plus 5.5 games handicap. But, I do see value in Djokovic 3-1 at plus 250. I make that price plus 220. And I do think Djokovic gets his, keeps his superlative 7-0 at the Australian Open finals record. I think he keeps that intact and picks up his eighth Aussie title this Sunday.
Okay, well, I'm going to go with Snize because I left you to last on purpose. You put your head right on the block. You went out on a limb and we asked you for your futures and you went with Djokovic. I don't know how you sleep at night with that type of tipping. Now, do you hedge? Do you hedge?
I very rarely hedge, and I don't think you should hedge in this scenario. I think these two gentlemen have broken this down nearly perfectly. So for once, I'm not going to have that much to say. So brief respite from my rambling. But I think that Djokovic has looked, as they've said, really, really solid. This whole tournament has rarely been under threat. I think the Federer first set surge shook him a little bit. I don't think he expected Fed to come at him that hard. But once he got back into the game, those were never really a doubt that Djokovic was going to get out of the situation. Thiem has looked exceptional. But at the same time, I think he looked very nervous against Zverev, maybe letting the occasion get to him a bit. He faced 14 break points, was broken a ton. I'm not sure that if he showcases any nerves, that Djokovic will let him get away with that. But I do think he'll be extremely competitive. He is one of the two players, really, that have a great matchup against Djokovic. I would include Stan Wawrinka because he has the kind of aggressive hitting and the huge weapons that can really just rip through Djokovic defenses, and there aren't a lot of players who can do that. And I'll expect to see a Thiem who's going to play up to his competition. He tends to play down or up to his competition. I think he played down to Zverev's level in the semi. I think we'll see a much different beast here. I think he'll really push Djokovic in the baseline rallies. He'll look to get on top and finish points early. And I think, as James said, a lot of close sets, a lot of tie breaks. So I'm seconding his bet there. I also gone with the over 36.5 at minus 120. And I wouldn't play this. I wouldn't stay away from playing this all the way up to 39.5. I think it's going to be Thiem taking at least a set, likely the first set, and then Djokovic slowly crawling back into the match and taking a 3-1, like Well said. So very solid handicaps all around.
Yeah, just to let people know that the selections that run along the bottom, they're a selection of what all the boys have done. So you've seen that Wow's actually gone over the games at 39, but he's getting minus 110, whereas James and Snize are over 36.5. And they're at minus 120. Obviously, the plus 5.5 games for Thiem at minus 105. And Djokovic to win 3-1. I'm going to come back to you again, Snize. I hope I don't regret it. But if Thiem wins the first set, do you go in on Djokovic again?
I would say that depends on the price, but likely not. I already have him at plus 125 to win the tournament. And if Thiem is playing spectacular tennis, well, who knows what happens? As James said, I mean, the trend can buck. So, I mean, I'm fairly confident in Djokovic, but I'm not going to be confident enough to be doubling down in a live spot. I'll just be rooting for Thiem continuing to give it a fight and getting that over in, and then hopefully cash a Djokovic ticket.
Okay, I just want one word from all of you. James, give me your set and the winner, please.
My set and winner?
Yes. So
what does that mean?
Well, Djokovic to win 3-1 or 3-2 or...
I mean, I think I would completely agree with Whale. I think 3-1 is probably most likely. My heart wants 3-2. Don't mind so much who gets it as long as it's an epic. But yeah, I mean, 3-2 or 3-1 Djokovic seem very likely scores to me.
Snize?
3-1 Djokovic.
Wow.
I'm going to say, I bet 3. I bet 3-1. So I hope that's what we see. I guess I'll just add to kind of your sentiment there, though, about live play. number one, if it's an open roof, if it's dry, and if it's not raining, and if it's cooler, I don't hate Thiem's chances to get this win, which may encourage me to get a little bit frisky with, I'm going to take Thiem money live before the match and try to do some in-play trading, because again, I'm expecting a couple of things pretty clearly. Thiem more aggressive early than Djokovic. Djokovic letting Thiem kind of expose some of his best tactics. What shots is he going to go to in key moments? I want to see that. I want to be prepared to absorb that later in the match. And then I would probably look for down a set plus down a break. You're going to see Djokovic likely at about plus money. And the second set here, if Thiem does take the first, is not necessarily going to be one-sided. And I don't think any set here is going to be one-sided. I don't think you really ever see a set play out where someone takes a break relatively early and then just holds serve, runs away and hides. There's going to be a lot of, back and forth here. There are going to be some momentum swings in this match for sure. And so I do think this sets up pretty well for a match to come in with the live trading approach. And obviously what plays well into that approach is a Thiem money line ticket from Jump Street, because again, we're expecting that's going to shorten up pretty good in this first set, especially if Thiem comes out firing missiles.